Now, guess what? I want to end this little brief description of this new universe picture with Jesus. This is the universe that Jesus knew. Jesus taught reincarnation. Okay. But Jesus knew the consciousness universe. The Gospel of St. John has I living in you, you living in me, we living in them. That's a possibility in the oneness of the consciousness universe that crosses all boundaries. Jesus ends his ancient Aramaic prayer that is translated as the Lord's Prayer, actually ends with the line, "Till oneness guide all." Till oneness guide all. This is a universe, the picture that I'm giving is a universe where you can reconnect with divinity. And that's what religion is all about. It's retying the tie. We broke a tie at some point and we're finding our way back. I'm taking down the barriers between ourselves and spirit. Jesus knew this universe. When he said at his Last Supper, "This is my body, this is my blood," this is actually a translation of a teaching he was giving on spirit, that the whole of matter is inspirited. The body, the blood, they are inspirited. They have a spirit. And many sacred societies that claim to have teachings of Jesus taught something like, he believed in the world spirit or spirit in the world. Jesus was just teaching this universe. I living in you, you living in me, we living in them. The spirit, the wind bloweth where it listeth. No one knows whence it comes or whither it goes. Thus is everyone born of the Spirit. Jesus knew this universe. The teachings of Jesus have been falsified from the start. Jesus had a place for the feminine. He was not threatened by the feminine. Women were among his disciples. He honored and loved women. At the crucifixion, it was the women who stayed beside him when all the male disciples fled. A woman, Mary Magdalene, was the first to see him after his resurrection. Jesus' own imagery for himself, some of which I've been quoting, "I am the way, the truth, the light," is the imagery of the ancient, the goddess Isis, who once presided over the whole of the ancient world. Jesus was a man at ease with the feminine. All of the evidence now, I'm going to say this in a minute, there are a lot of things about Jesus Jesus' teachings have been falsified from the start, and Jesus has been falsified from the start. If you think Jesus was interested in family values, you need to realize that you need to read the passages where he says, "I have not come to bring peace but a sword," between mother and daughter, between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Your enemies are those of your own household. When the disciples were outside, when his family was outside asking for him, and one of the disciples said, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are out asking for you," Jesus said, "Who are my mother and brothers and sisters? Those who know the will of God and do it." This great teacher of love took the whole of religious tradition before him, the Old Testament, all of the laws, the prophets, everything, and he simplified them into 2 commandments. Love. Love spirit, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. You have to realize something about Jesus. He did not write his scriptures. Jesus taught love. His scriptures were written by men writing long after him, and they wrote down rules. People who are fear-based have to write down rules. People who are in love are like the wind who blows where it listeth. There are no rules governing how they are. Jesus taught love. He had very little use for the religious establishment of his day. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees! You hold the keys to the kingdom, but you neither go in nor yourself nor allow others to go in. Woe to you, lawyers! You lay heavy burdens on the people. Jesus was pretty rough on money also. The love of money is the root of all evil. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for the rich to get into the kingdom of heaven. Both the Buddha and Jesus taught the less you have, the less you have to worry about. One young man wanted to follow Jesus, and Jesus said, okay, sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and then come and follow me. Jesus and his disciples were beggars. They asked for donations from people. Jesus didn't charge for his talks, but he asked for donations, you know. If you would help them out, they would be grateful, but this is not organized religion. This great teacher of love. Well, there's something missing in the scriptures. First of all, God didn't write the scriptures, neither did Jesus. They were written by men, many of whom claimed a particular pipeline to God. Some had it, but some don't. And if you're running across fear in the scriptures, you're reading the works of men, because Spirit is love and so is Jesus. There's something really radically missing in Jesus, and that's any talk whatsoever of sex, aside a few things about adultery. How come? Okay, Jesus didn't write the scriptures, but can we really understand that this great teacher of love would come and say nothing whatsoever about sex, which according to all the reports is everybody spends every 5 minutes thinking about? Jesus had not only a lot to say, he left, according to Seth, he left a written teaching on sex and intimacy that was destroyed by the early church. Jesus left one teaching, and it was destroyed by the early church, who, you know, because it's much easier to make up God in your image than to grow into the fullness of who he is and was. Now, all the evidence is, first of all, the whole of Western civilization is based on the worship of a celibate male God. What if he wasn't? All the indications now are that at the dawn of Christianity was a sacred partnership between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, broken by the church, who accelerated the male to the highest place, and began this long worship and self-congratulation of all things male. And St. Paul continued it with women, not to speak, not to teach in the assembly. Women held positions of power in the very early church, but they were gradually edged out. And this whole tradition began the long put down of the feminine and of women. It'll lead down the road to 9 million women burned at the stake. Some people say it's a conservative estimate. The war, the effort to destroy the wise women of the world, the prophetesses, the poets, the healers, the teachers, the dumbing down of women. It began in the West. I suppose, with the Greeks. It began, the two great sources of culture, Athens and Jerusalem. Both of them got their start by, hey, let's beat up on women. You know, what a great idea, what a great way to define ourselves. That's what they did. This is not Jesus. And now all over the world there are little groups of people reading the books like the Da Vinci Code or the Hidden Gospel of Mary Magdalene, that describes Jesus as always kissing Mary on the lips. He loved her so much. And the disciples complaining, but that he preferred her to them, and he telling them that she knows more than all of you put together. there was a sacred partnership between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Margaret Starbird has done a lot of work on this, called The Greatest Story Never Told. The horrible kind of male celibate domination of the West falsified Jesus' teachings right from the start. Little groups of people are all over the world reading these books, the Da Vinci Code, the Mary Magdalene Gospels, Margaret Starbird's work, other work, asking, what happened to the feminine history? What happened to women? And, where did they go? The church has ignored these works for a few years. But nowadays, the Vatican thought police are rushing around trying to prevent the faithful from reading them. Why? Well, Jesus kissing a woman on the lips? Oh my God, what an awful thing to have to say about a celibate Savior, male God, who's sitting up there to judge us all. And, if it had to admit these things, the sacred priesthood would come apart. I would bet in his second coming, Jesus will come back as a woman. I can just hear the priesthood now. Oh, we didn't think of that one. Jesus left a written teaching on sex which was destroyed by the church. So, where did the West get its teachings on sex? Well, they came from good old St. Augustine. The whole of Western Christianity has been the casualty of St. Augustine's youthful excesses. St. Augustine on sex, only for procreation, always sinful. I would be willing to bet that was not Jesus' teaching on sex, but it is St. Augustine's, and St. Augustine was canonized for it, and the West is only just basically beginning to extricate itself from the madness of male priests, celibate male priests. And I would say at this point that the sin, suffering, crucifixion, and death that have been the preoccupation of a celibate male priesthood are on a collision course with the life-giving, soul-nourishing energies of women and of the feminine. And it's a good thing. And I'll have a lot more to say about it as we go on in these talks, because it's part of our reclaiming the absolute fullness of our own sexuality as part of our humanity, part of our divinity, that is only for procreation and always sinful. I mean, what a death-dealing kind of principle Christianity had built into it from the 4th century on. And that was also the council in the 4th century that decided to drop reincarnation and control people by fear. Fear has nothing to do with Jesus. The teaching of Jesus were falsified from the start. Again, it's take the barriers down. We are very large, and we are lovers, and we are divine beings throughout. I would say that's as close to Jesus' teaching as I can get. And so, let me answer. The answer of the church has always been, we're here to suffer. And because Jesus suffered, and they have made sure that we have all suffered. This is not Jesus. And resurrection, there has to be a death for there to be a resurrection. But resurrection is the end point, the aim and end. And well, what are we here for? Well, I would say, first pass, we're here to care for the planet and each other. We're here to nurture everything on the planet and each other. We're here to co-create with Spirit something beautiful for all on the planet. We are responsible for all, and we have in fact put ourselves in the position where we now are responsible for all. If the planet goes into extinction, it will be our fault. And I would say the real reason for human beings on the planet, that our ultimate goal is to bring into the earth plane, which is the plane of fear and separation, the love, the connectedness, the joy, and the wisdom that we know in the spirit world from whence we come. To bring that into the earth plane and to end the separation between the spiritual and the material, that all of these distinctions, that are just, they're this or that, either or, they're all part of a continuum. And they all originate, these illusions, at every level of our lives. They originate with getting matter wrong. Seth says, all through down the ages, there were men and women called speakers who kept alive the understanding that reality is really an expression of consciousness. And that consciousness, because it's not, it doesn't strike you that way. You look out and you see things. And so I think Jesus would be at home in the universe that I'm elaborating. The Buddha also knew this universe. The mystics know, this is the universe the mystics know. If Immanuel Kant, I'm going to speak to the philosophers one day on my own hook, but at this point I'll just say, if Immanuel Kant had read the mystics of all cultures who agree on virtually everything, rather than the theologians of his day that agreed on nothing, we would be living in a very different world. Kant thought we couldn't know ultimate reality. It was this great mystery. We can know ultimate reality. We live and move in ultimate realities all the time. And the minute you realize where the illusions are coming from, Kant is preceded by Descartes. And many times in his work you see that he starts on the assumption that matter is just something devoid of consciousness. When you realize that matter is fully conscious, as you are, we know ultimate mysteries all the time. They're not hidden from us, and it doesn't take we put so many barricades between ourselves and just about everything else, and it's time to take them down because spirit is everywhere. That's all I'm going to say about this part. Later on I'm going to talk about, the follies of organized religion and what the man-made religions really are, and what heresies are, and what the true religion is. But for now, that's all I want to say. Everyone needs, the Gospels are full of poetry. Everybody needs to read the poetry of Jesus for himself. The birds of the air have their nests, and the foxes have dens, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. The lilies of the field, they toil not, neither do they spin, but Solomon in all his glory was never arrayed like one of them. You are being taken care of. And the gospel, the real teachings of Jesus are in his poetry. I come not to condemn the world, but to save it. What the church has done to Jesus is grotesque. They've put him up there at the right hand of the Father to judge the living and the dead. Jesus, our brother, he meant to share his Christhood. I am only the firstborn of many brothers and sisters. Greater works than I have done, you shall do. Jesus did not put in these barriers. And once you realize that, one, we are immortal, eternal beings, just like Jesus, who reincarnate. Two, we are incarnations of spirit. Three, it's all about being here now and focusing on the earth and bringing spirit to earth. That's the task of these times in our history. It's not looking to heaven and getting to heaven by doing good deeds. It's about bringing spirit here. We have spent centuries gazing heavenwards, and we are now at a place where we can, it's time to change the focus. We're here to be here, and this is where we need to be. Okay, now our last talk, I began to talk about the disaster that we have created for the planet and what needs to happen. We're going to take a break, and then I'll tell you more of what needs to happen, starting with the corporations.